Welcome to Connect, the podcast for the California MBA, featuring one-on-one interviews with movers and shakers in the mortgage industry. My name is Paul Gelati, CEO of the California MBA, and I'm glad you could join us today. Before we get started on this very exciting chat, I'd like to thank our 2025 President Council sponsors, AmeriHome, Consolidated Analytics, Funding Shield, Guild Mortgage, Rocket Mortgage, Weiner Brodsky Kinder, and Western Alliance Bank. These companies provide a tremendous level of financial support for our association, and we are so greatly appreciative of their continued support. So we're going to dive in today on Connect podcast. I am so excited to welcome Pranay Shetty, co-founder and CEO of Sei AI, a company building intelligent compliance and customer service agents for mortgage lending, banking, and financial space. Pranay has a deep root in both financial and technology, and under his leadership, Sei is pioneering ways institutions can scale customer support, compliance, and regulatory review with AI. And I will let everyone know that's listening, we had to actually stop our understanding each other in business was longer probably than this Connect podcast. We had just had a great time. And so Pranay, thank you so much for joining us today.
Paul, thanks for having me. This is going to be so much fun.
It is going to be fun. We're going to go off the rails and we're going to go absolutely crazy. I have this feeling. But let's start with tell it, because you have such a vast experience, right? So I would love for you to talk about your origin story. How did you come to combine finance, tech, and AI into what you've done building at Sei?
Yeah. So I worked in financial services for most of my career. So worked across banking, private equity, fintech. I really saw how technology impacted sort of more traditional financial services. My last role was with a real estate tech company called Cloud Kitchens, where we were buying real estate and setting up delivery-only kitchens. So did that across a few countries. And when ChatGPT came out, I think like so many other people, it was a light bulb moment for me. Because I had seen so much manual repetitive work. Like I did so much manual repetitive work in the early days of my career as an analyst in investment banking. And I could see the sort of great unlock that this technology gave, right? And so immediately spent, I think it was like hours just playing around with it, trying to figure out what can we do. And then just started speaking to old colleagues, right? So start speaking to friends in banking, fintech, lending, and slowly as we sort of dove deeper, a ton of use cases just started coming out, right? And over the last 2-3 years, as the technology has gotten better, it's been incredible sort of the real live use cases that we've been able to deploy with customers.
Yeah, and I can't wait to dive in because again, in our conversation, the value prop of Sei is so compelling. I mean, you're talking about a solution that does scanning of communication, marketing material, customer interaction for compliance issues for CX as well. It seems to provide the everlasting need for, and this is really important, we talked about this at the Housing Wire Summit, providing a need for speed and accuracy, right? So it's not just about speed, the consumer wants accuracy. So from your sales or growth lens, what objections do financial institutions most commonly raise when they're talking to you about your value add, and how have you addressed them before?
Yes, so I think the big challenges that most financial institutions have with AI, despite the hype, we've not seen significant adoption yet. And the two big challenges I see, one is obviously hallucinations and the worries about how do I, put guardrails or control what the AI says, right? And the second one I'd say is more around like specificity. What I mean by that is there is a tendency for large financial institutions to say, hey, we're going to have an AI strategy. And then let's speak to everyone in the org and now try and figure out what are the 20 different places AI can come in, right? But that ends, you just end up paying a consultant a lot of money and spending a year and a half trying to figure out what to do. So I think the solve for the first one is, one, the technology, like underlying LLMs have gotten significantly better, right? Two, I think think even from like a software development perspective, it's completely changed how we build software. Like maybe 3, 4 years ago, software teams would spend maybe, 90% of the time building the software, 10% of the time doing QA, testing, figuring out edge cases, and plugging any holes. Now it's completely changed, right? We spend 20% of the time building it, but 80% of time is spent, how do you make sure that the AI isn't saying something that it shouldn't say, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'll give you an example. I was playing with Amazon's chatbot a few months ago, and I got it to recommend Amazon competitors, right? Now, Amazon probably doesn't care because who else are you going to go to? But to anyone else, that's an absolute disaster, right? So
Right.
I think because of our focus being just financial services, we understand how important it is to sort of put guardrails in place, make sure that responses are compliant from a regulatory perspective. And so that's where we focus all of our effort and time, right? Going to the sort of second challenge that most financial institutions have, I think our approach to that has always been to say, hey, let's start with one relatively risk or lower risk use case, and let's
Mm-hmm.
start with that, right? Let's actually see if like AI can actually deliver value, right? The advantage with AI also, I think, unlike maybe more traditional software, has been you can spin up a POC much faster, right? You don't need to spend 6 to 12 months doing an integration and only then see the impact. We've been able to do this even with large financial institutions in 2 to 4 weeks, spin up a POC, whether it's, on the underwriting side, whether it is on the voice side, very quickly be able to show them that, hey, this is the impact that you will see once you deploy it at scale.
Yeah, it's amazing to me, and you touched on this, and we'll get to this in a short while. But it's amazing to me as someone who's been in the technology space previously, how quickly things are now turned around with development, product build. Now it's not, put the key and turn it and it's on, right? But you're talking about things that used to take, 6 to 9 months to design and develop are now down to a couple of months.
Yes.
So when you talk about AI specifically, making sure that the LLM models and your algorithms, I guess, are built out to the point where the AI agents, if I may call them that, don't go beyond what they're supposed to be doing, and they stay within those guardrails. So it's almost like we've got a whole new set of what developers work on and focus on now with AI, as opposed to what it used to be maybe 2 years ago.
100%. I'll give you one example, right? So before we launch any voice agent, right, we'll put guardrails in place. We'll do a lot of testing where we just have our team doing calls with the agent, pretending to be consumers, customers, the sort of engineering product teams will do similar things, but there's only so many calls you can do. So we use AI where we just create AI simulations. We create an AI that's pretending to be a customer, speaking to the AI that we've created for customer support. And now they can do tens of thousands of calls and helps us figure out a lot of edge cases there. So sort of even using AI to test AI is what we focus on.
Yeah, I think that's pretty awesome. It's exciting to me because that means that there's so much opportunity. There's so much more. There's room to fill in the gaps, and there's so much opportunity right now. Granted, we have to be careful. I think a lot of lenders are starting to look at the regulatory landscape with what they wanted to use AI for, and now what they're kind of scooting back and saying, hey, let's pause on over here and maybe use it in other aspects of our organization in the loan life cycle. So it's interesting to sit back and watch a little bit of a shift, but the speed and accuracy and opportunity AI as a solution brings is going to provide such a huge lift in the industry. As we were just talking about, the mortgage lending space is leaning into AI. And I think there's been a little bit of jousting already with where they're looking to utilize AI as a solution. Again, many are concerned about regulation. We're constantly looking at legislative bills, from the perspective of the California MBA as well as the national MBA, bias oversight. And we also, earlier you talked about hallucinations. How do you, as a founder and technician, how do you balance innovation with accountability in the AI models that you build? Can you, for a hot second, and I'll note this on our podcast, Can you get a little technical with me so we can learn a little bit about that?
Yeah. So okay, I'll talk through like a few things that we specifically go through, right? I think the first one is just making sure you're picking the right use cases, right? There are going to be things that lenders, banks are worried about, do not want to have AI make, as an example, make a decision, right? Go through the entire underwriting process and make a decision saying, hey, lend to Paul, but do not lend to Pranay, right? You don't want the AI doing that, right?
Right.
So I think picking the use cases, figuring out what parts of the value chain do you want AI augmenting a human? It becomes really important, right? Two, I think where we've spent a lot of time on is just explainability and auditability. What I mean by that is you go to ChatGPT today, you ask a question, it'll give you a response. You ask the same question 5 times, the responses will change slightly, right? Someone else asks us the same question, the response may be very different. You don't necessarily want that happening, right? And so from our perspective, how do you have, every response that the AI gives, right? Whether it's when it's reviewing a document and, giving an explanation for why it thinks, this is problematic, it needs to be able to explain why it's coming to that conclusion. And two, cite the relevant sources, right? So if it's
Mm,
looking at an appraisal report and it's saying, hey, this appraisal report mentions an addict, but there isn't a photograph of an addict, right? It's a very simple example, but it should actually cite all the things here so that a human can come in and review it and come make a decision then on how they want to proceed with it. This
okay.
actually leads to the my next point, which I think having a human in the loop is really important, right?
Mhm.
And so the way we've constantly thought about development is how do you augment the human, whether it's the processor, an underwriter, someone in customer support, so that instead of excuse me, instead of them spending, you know, half an hour, 3 hours reviewing a loan file or reviewing documents, can the AI do a first pass, pull in all the relevant information, cite the relevant sources, whether it's from regulation, whether it's from the agencies, so the human can now look at it and within 5 minutes say, hey, this works. This is a problem that I need to raise with the borrower on my next call. And so that the human can actually spend time on things that require human judgment, require that connection with the customer, and they're not spending time just endlessly reviewing documents, which AI is actually good at, right?
Yeah.
And the last bit you talked about is around hallucinations. I think that's where not just us, but I think like every sort of AI company that's selling to enterprises across industries is focused on, right? Obviously, because we're selling to financial services, it becomes an even higher bar, right?
Yeah.
And so it goes back to sort of use cases that we pick and to just how we built the software, right? So making sure we've put the right guardrails in place, making sure we understand regulation, putting, regulatory guardrails in place, doing a lot of simulation testing so that even before an AI is launched, you're not just doing 5 calls with the customer support AI or 20 calls, because that's not enough, but doing like tens of thousands of like automated calls to
Yeah.
figure out what are the edge cases that could come up. And then
Yeah.
in real time, right? How do you have, you know, potentially like multiple LLMs, one speaking on a call, another one listening on a call? If the listening agent actually picks up something that could be problematic, can it jump in and self-correct, right?
Yeah.
So those are some of the things that we're doing.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I think from my perspective, I'm hearing this. I was a COO of a mid-sized IMB, and so I can sit back as we're, and it wasn't that long ago, but it seems like a different era, right? Like it was 5 years ago. So it wasn't the difference between no TV and black and white TV. It was just
Yeah.
black and white TV and color TV, maybe. But it's fascinating to sit back and think about. You have the capability as a technician with an AI solution to talk to the lenders about a solve that's really needed. And that's lifting their team members, empowering their team members to do the function that they were hired to do. Like no longer do you need a processor, an underwriter to flip through an 80-page tax return or 500 pages of bank statements or a 60-page appraisal report. You can get the analysis from an AI agent, multiple AI agents at once, and then have your underwriter become the credit analyzer that they're supposed to be, that they're meant to be, that they want to be, and that you pay them to be.
Yes.
And so it really provides kind of like the end all be all solve when you speak about the loan life cycle, that us as lenders are looking for. So it's fascinating to me, and there's so much more left, which brings me to my next question for you, my friend. Looking ahead in 26 and then beyond, because 26 is right around the corner. What is the AI-driven trend that you believe will reshape compliance or customer experience in the mortgage lending industry? And if you could tell us how lenders should be preparing for that now. So what do you see as the future for AI, and how can the industry start to really get ready for it?
Yes. So I think for financial services in particular, I think the industry still has to catch up with where like the AI technology is today, right? So we should be excited about what's coming in 2026 and beyond. But I think even where the technology is today is very, very underutilized in financial services, right? I think as lenders think about this, I'm going to sound like a broken record because I'm going to keep talking about the same thing. But I think the most important thing for lenders to think about is where are the use cases that they want to deploy and test AI, right? We've talked about this, I think, before this, and I've mentioned this on the podcast as well. Having an AI strategy and then figuring out these are the 20 places to deploy AI, in most cases, is a recipe for disaster, or it's a recipe for paying one of the big four a lot of money. Right? We've seen sort of successful sort of AI execution is when they've said, hey, let's start with one or two use cases, let's launch, let's see what's working, let's learn from that, and then take those learning elsewhere, right? I think what I am most excited about, I think, going into 2026 is just the number of conversations that we're now starting to have with large banks, lenders across markets. So we're live in the US, in the UK, in Southeast Asia. And increasingly, I think just in the last 3 months, the number of people who've reached out to us and said, hey, we're now ready to like start having conversations about AI. And it felt like at the start of the year, or even when we were at the Mortgage Innovators Conference, it felt a little bit like it was falling on deaf ears because people were still worried about AI. They weren't sure what to do. But I think in the last 4 months, I don't know what's changed, but like everyone's now thinking about, hey, these are the 5 places I can put AI. How do I go about doing that? Right. The one other thing I will sort of tell, everyone that we're speaking to, like customers, potential customers, is always figure out how you want to sort of implement AI in your organization. So what I mean by that is there are obviously multiple vendors. You can build it in-house. You can sort of, use third parties to build it. It's really important to like take baby steps, right? So figure out use cases, launch, test. With AI, it's never been easier to like do demos and do test cases, right? They're both good and bad sides to it because you'll have a lot of people reaching out to you with a really impressive demo that will just break as it gets to production. But it gives you great insight and it gives you a great feel for what's now possible, right? I think it's just so completely different than what was possible. Even like, I'll be very frank, like what we're building today, I don't think we could have built even a year ago, right?
Oh yeah,
So
absolutely.
it's a really exciting time to be in the industry. So sort of balancing that with like real world production use cases is going to be a lot of fun. It's what I'm looking forward to in 2026.
I completely agree. It's going to be a very exciting year. That with our market changes, we've got some uncertainty with market. We've got some uncertainty with our agencies, our GSEs, and some of the a little bit in the political space. But I think there's a ton of opportunity, and AI is certainly a part of that. As are you, as is Sei AI. And I want to thank you so much for joining us and sharing how Sei AI is transforming compliance and the customer experience through intelligent automation. This conversation was an absolute joy. I appreciate your time. It's really exciting to hear how innovation like yours is, as you were saying, helping lenders realize how they can better themselves, really. And it's also very exciting to see the fear factor kind of go away, as you were talking about. It's very true. AI is a thing and people are adopting it. And I think as long as there's intelligent people like yourself Pranay, who can talk to a lender about, this is not some big scary monster that's going to take over your lending institution and, start stealing your money and do things wrong and hallucinate all over the place. I think there's there's room for growth, but the adoption rate has, to your point, has been great. So again, thank you for your time. We look forward to seeing you at Mortgage Innovators and other conferences out there. To access our Connect podcast episode, follow our YouTube channel. We're also available on SoundCloud, Apple Podcast, and Spotify. We'll be back in 2 weeks with another episode of Connect, and we'll see you then.